The answer he didn't expect. A story of a public rejection, a private collapse, and the love that was waiting on the other side. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. He had been planning it for 4 months. The restaurant reservation, a corner table at Elevate, the rooftop restaurant in downtown Atlanta that required a 6-week wait list and a credit card deposit just to hold the date. The arrangement with the string quartet, 4 musicians positioned near the entrance who would begin playing the song from their first date the moment the maitre d' gave the signal. The custom ring, a pear-cut diamond on a platinum band that had taken 8 weeks in a jeweler in Buckhead, and an amount of money that made his best friend whistle slowly through his teeth when he heard the number. The photographer positioned at the adjacent table, pretending to be a couple on their own date, ready to capture the moment. The family members waiting at a restaurant across the street to rush over for the celebration once she said yes. He had thought of everything, except the one thing that mattered, whether she wanted to say yes. His name is Brandon Cole. He is 34 years old, and the Saturday evening in September when he knelt in front of 112 people at Elevate Restaurant in downtown Atlanta and opened a ring box and looked up at the face of the woman he had been with for 3 years and heard the word that broke every plan he had made, is the evening that split his life into a before and an after. What came after is the reason this story is worth telling. Before we move forward with the story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help us to grow this channel to uplift more people. Brandon Cole and Simone Ashworth met at a work conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the spring 3.5 years before the Saturday evening in September. Brandon was a marketing director at a mid-sized logistics company, good at his job, well regarded, the kind of professional who moved through networking events with the ease of someone who genuinely liked people and had the social memory to prove it. He remembered names. He remembered what people did and where they were from and what they had said at the last event. He was charming in the specific, reliable way of someone who was not performing charm but simply had a great deal of it. Simone was a senior project manager at a consulting firm, precise, composed, with the specific quality of someone who was always the most prepared person in any room she entered. She was striking in appearance and deliberately unaware of it, or rather, deliberately unbothered by it, in the way of a woman who had decided a long time ago that her competence was the thing that would define how people experienced her. They met at the coffee station between sessions on the first morning. Brandon made a joke about the quality of conference coffee that was just good enough to make Simone laugh. The real laugh. The one she didn't deploy for performances. She remembered it afterwards, specifically, as the thing that made her give the conversation more time than she usually gave conference conversations. They talked for 40 minutes. He asked for her card. She gave it to him. He called 3 days later. Not a text, a call, which she noted. They dated long distance for the first 6 months while he arranged a transfer that brought him to Atlanta, which she also noted, and which meant more to her than she told him at the time. The first year was genuinely good. The second year was where the first cracks appeared. The third year was where Simone had been doing the accounting. Simone Ashworth was not a person who made decisions lightly. She was the kind of woman who made lists, not performatively, but because the process of putting things on paper and examining them was how she understood what she actually thought as distinct from what she felt in the moment. She kept a journal. She had a therapist she saw twice a month. She was, in the language of the people who knew her well, someone who knew herself and acted from that knowledge with consistency. What she saw in Brandon, increasingly through year 2 and conclusively through year 3, was a specific and significant pattern. Brandon Cole was attentive to the performance of a relationship. He was excellent at dates, the planning, the thoughtfulness, the specific details that communicated he had paid attention. He was excellent at the romantic gestures, at the anniversaries remembered, at the things that made a relationship look, from the outside, like the kind of relationship people aspired to. What he was not good at was the interior. He did not know how to fight fairly. When conflict arose, his instinct was to redirect toward the romantic gesture rather than stay in the difficult conversation until it was resolved. The nice dinner after the argument was always more appealing to him than the full resolution of the argument. Over time, this produced in their relationship a collection of half-resolved things, real issues that had been redirected with reservations and flowers, and the specific charm that Simone had found so compelling at a coffee station in Charlotte. She had raised this directly in year 2, and then again, more specifically in year 3. Brandon had responded both times with attentiveness and warmth, and the genuine feeling of a man who had heard what she said and intended to address it. He had not addressed it, not from cruelty, from the specific blind spot of someone who experienced a relationship primarily through its external expressions, and who genuinely could not see that the external expressions were doing the work of concealing a foundation that was not being built. He thought they were fine. He believed, with the complete confidence of a man who had planned a proposal down to the positioning of a photographer, that they were ready for the next chapter. He was the only one in the relationship who believed that. The proposal was, by any external measure, extraordinary. The string quartet, the corner table, the 112 people who happened to be dining at Elevate on a Saturday evening and who became, without their consent but with general goodwill, the audience for what Brandon had planned. The maitre d' gave the signal at 8:15 between the appetizers and the main course. The quartet began. Brandon reached into his jacket pocket. He got down on one knee. He looked up at Simone's face, and he saw something that his 4 months of planning had not accounted for. He saw a woman who was not surprised, not in the way of someone who had found out about the plan in advance and was performing surprise poorly, in the way of a woman who had been watching the planning happen, who had noticed the jewelry research left open on his laptop, who had understood what the restaurant reservation and the Charlotte friends flying in meant, who had spent 3 weeks knowing this was coming and trying to decide what to do about it. She had not told him. She had hoped in the 3 weeks that something would happen that would make the decision for her, that he would say something that would resolve the accounting she had been doing, that the conversation she had needed to have with him for the better part of a year would somehow happen on its own. It had not happened on its own, and now he was on one knee in front of 112 people with the ring box open, and the string quartet playing, and a photographer pretending to be a couple at the adjacent table. She looked at him. She looked at the ring. She looked at the room. She said, "Brandon." He said, "Simone Ashworth, will you?" She said, "I can't." The quartet stopped mid-phrase. She said, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but I can't." She picked up her bag. She walked out. 112 people watched Brandon Cole remain on one knee for approximately 4 seconds after the door closed behind Simone. Then he stood up. He closed the ring box. He put it in his pocket. He sat back down at the table. The maitre d', who had seen many things in 22 years of running a restaurant and had never seen this specific thing, came to the table and said very quietly that the evening's charges were taken care of. Brandon sat at the table by himself for 11 minutes. Then he called his best friend, Darius, who was across the street at the Celebration restaurant with 11 family members and friends who had flown in from 4 cities. The call lasted 45 seconds. He walked out of Elevate Restaurant and got in his car and drove home and sat in the parking garage of his building for a long time. The family and friends who had flown in from 4 cities were informed by Darius, who handled it with the specific, painful grace of a best friend performing the most difficult possible errand. His mother, Joyce, called him 6 times before he picked up. His sister, Renata, drove to his building and buzzed his apartment until he answered the intercom. He told her he was fine. He was not fine. He was sitting on the floor of his kitchen, not dramatically, not for effect, just the specific directionless collapse of someone whose legs have stopped working in the way that legs sometimes stop working when the structure beneath them has been removed. And he was looking at the ring box on the counter and trying to understand how 4 months of planning and 3 years of a relationship had ended on a Saturday night in 11 words. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I can't. The news traveled the way news travels among people who are connected and who care. Darius told the inner circle. The inner circle told the broader circle. The broader circle found out through social media. The photographer's presence had not been secret, and several diners at Elevate had filmed the moment, and the footage circulated before Brandon was even home. The reactions divided along predictable lines. His people, his mother Joyce, his sister Renata, his college friends, the colleagues who liked him, were in his corner with the specific loyalty of people who love someone and are outraged on his behalf. They described what Simone had done as humiliating, as public, as unforgivable, as something that said everything about her character. A smaller number of people, the ones who knew Simone well, who had watched the relationship from a position of genuine access, were more complicated in their responses. They were sad for Brandon. They also understood, without being able to say so in the immediate aftermath without being dismissed, that the public setting of the proposal had not been Simone's choice, and that the preceding months had contained conversations that he had not fully heard. Simone herself went quiet. She moved through the next several weeks with the composed, private grief of someone who knew she had done the least harmful thing available to her in a situation where there was no version without harm, and who was prepared to be mischaracterized and was absorbing it. She did not make a public statement. She did not respond to the social media footage. She texted Brandon once, 3 days after Val, to say that she was sorry for the public circumstances and that she had needed to be honest and that she hoped eventually he would understand. He did not respond. Brandon Cole was by the 3rd week not doing well. He went to work. He performed the function of someone going to work. He was present in meetings. He responded to emails. He produced the outputs his role required with the specific muscle memory executions of someone who has done something long enough that the performance of it does not require genuine presence. His genuine presence was somewhere else. He stopped going to the gym. He stopped calling his mother back with the same frequency. He declined 3 invitations from Darius and 1 from Renata, and told himself it was because he needed space, which was partially true and mostly a way of avoiding the conversations that space was filling in for. He was looking, in the evenings, at the footage from Elevate, not all of it. He had not watched the full clip with sound, just the still images, the ones that showed him on one knee, the ones that showed the moment Simone turned away, the ones that showed the door closing behind her. He was, in the specific and serious way of someone who has had the internal structure of their self-understanding removed without warning, losing ground. He had believed, completely and sincerely, that he was a good partner. He had believed that the relationship was, with minor, navigable friction, fundamentally sound. He had believed, most consequentially, that he knew Simone, that the 3 years had produced a mutual knowing that the proposal was celebrating. He understood now that he had not known her as well as he had known the performance of knowing her. And the distinction was not one he could dismiss because she had walked out of a restaurant in front of 112 people, which meant the distinction was real enough to produce that outcome. He was wrong about something. He did not know yet what it was. He did not know how to find out. He sat in his apartment in the evenings with the ring box in the kitchen drawer and the specific, disorienting loneliness of someone who has not only lost a relationship, but lost the story he had been telling himself about his own life. Darius Washington had been Brandon's best friend since their sophomore year at Georgia Tech, and was, in Brandon's life, the person who told him the truth. Not always comfortably, not always in the moment Brandon was ready to hear it. Darius showed up at Brandon's apartment on a Saturday morning 6 weeks after the proposal. He brought food. He sat down. He let Brandon talk for 45 minutes. The circular, repetitive processing of someone who is working through something and needs to move through it rather than be redirected from it. Then he said, "Can I tell you something?" Brandon said, "Yeah." Darius said, "I love you. You know that." Brandon said, "I know." Darius said, She told you twice that something wasn't working, and you responded with dinners instead of conversations." He looked at him. "I'm not saying she handled it right at the restaurant. That was rough. But the reason she did it there instead of before is that she had already tried to do it before, in ways you didn't receive." Brandon was quiet. Darius said, "I'm not here to make you feel worse. I'm here because you're sitting in this apartment watching footage of a Saturday night instead of figuring out who you want to be going forward. And I don't think you can figure that out on your own. Not this specific thing." Brandon said, "What does that mean?" Darius said, "Come to church with me tomorrow." Brandon had not been to church since his grandmother's funeral 2 years prior. He was not opposed to faith. He had grown up in a household where it was present, warmly and without rigidity. But he had let it drift, the way adults sometimes let things drift when life is going well enough that the navigation system feels optional. He said, "All right." Cornerstone Seventh-day Adventist Church met on Saturdays, which Darius explained as they drove, and which Brandon received with the openness of someone who had run out of the energy to have preferences about things that didn't matter. Pastor Leon Whitaker was 60 years old, a composed, unhurried man who preached with the specific quality of someone who had sat with enough people in enough difficult seasons to understand that what a room full of people needed most on any given Sabbath was not impressive oratory, but the honest truth. He was preaching from Psalm 34. He read verse 18. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." He said, "I want to talk about the word crushed." The original language of this psalm describes something more specific than sadness. It describes a spirit that has been ground down, a person who has been operating under a weight they were not built to carry alone, and who has finally arrived at the specific, stripped down honesty of someone who can no longer pretend the weight isn't there. He looked at the room. That person, the one who is crushed, who is at the end of what their own resources can manage, is precisely the person this verse is speaking to. Not the person who has it together, not the person who has processed and resolved and arrived at peace, the one who is still on the floor. He paused. God is close to that person, not waiting for them to get up before he arrives. Close, present, in the floor level moments. Brandon sat in the third row of Cornerstone Seventh-day Adventist Church and felt Psalm 34:18 arrive in the exact location where the last 6 weeks had settled. He was not okay. He had not been okay. He had been performing okay with enough consistency that the performance had started to feel like the only available mode. The verse was not asking him to perform. It was telling him that where he was, the floor, the ring box in the kitchen drawer, the footage he had been watching, was a place that was occupied, that he was not alone in it, that the being crushed was something that had been seen and named, and that a specific someone was close to. He cried, quietly, in the third row, next to Darius, who put a hand on his shoulder and said nothing, which was exactly right. He went back the following Saturday, He talked to Pastor Whitaker after the service, briefly at first, and then, as the weeks passed, in the longer conversations of a man who was beginning to do the specific interior work that the romantic gestures had been doing in place of. He saw a counselor, not because anyone required it, because he had finally understood, sitting in a church on a Saturday morning with tears on his face, that understanding himself was not optional and had not been optional for a long time. The counselor was direct with him in the way of someone whose job is to see clearly. The patterns Simone had named were real. The redirect toward gesture instead of resolution was real. The profound ability to plan for the external expression of a relationship while underinvesting in its interior was real. This was not a comfortable thing to know about himself. He worked on it anyway. 14 months after the Saturday evening at Elevate, Brandon Cole was sitting in the fellowship hall at Cornerstone after the Sabbath service, helping set up for the monthly community meal when Darius sat down across from him. Darius said, "I heard about Simone." Brandon said, "What about her?" Darius said, "She's engaged." Brandon held that for a moment. Then he said, "To who?" Darius said, "Someone she met at work about 8 months ago." Brandon was quiet. He thought about a Saturday evening in September, about a string quartet stopping mid-phrase, about 11 words and a door closing. He thought about 14 months of the hardest interior work he had ever done. The counseling, the Sabbath mornings, the conversations with Pastor Whitaker, the specific and unglamorous process of learning to stay in the difficult conversation instead of redirecting toward the gesture. He thought about who he was now compared to who he had been on one knee at Elevate. He said, "I hope she's happy." Darius looked at him. He said, "You mean that?" Brandon said, "Yeah, I do." He picked up the stack of chairs he was moving. "She did me a favor. I didn't know it at the time, but she did." He carried the chairs across the fellowship hall. He thought about Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He had been brokenhearted. He had been crushed. And in the being crushed, something had been reached that the 4 months of planning and the string quartet and the photographer and the pear-cut diamond on a platinum band had never been able to reach. Something real, something that was his, not borrowed from gesture, not maintained by performance, his. And it had taken a woman walking out of a restaurant and a best friend with food on a Saturday morning and an open door and a verse about a crushed spirit and a God who was close to exactly that. To find it, Psalm 34:18 was written by someone who understood what it felt like to have the structure beneath you removed without warning. David wrote it, not from comfort, not from a position of things going well, but from the specific, documented experience of someone who had lost the ground he was standing on and had discovered, in the losing of it, what was actually present in the place he had fallen. Brandon Cole planned a proposal that was perfect in every external detail. And the most important detail, the interior of the relationship he was proposing to continue, was the one he had systematically redirected away from for 18 months. This is not a story about Simone being right or Brandon being wrong in some simple, tidy way. Both of them bear something in this story. Simone could have had the direct, final conversation before a Saturday evening in September. Brandon could have heard the conversation she did have more than once and stayed in them rather than routing around them with a reservation. But the moral this story most specifically carries is about the difference between the performance of a relationship and the interior of one, between the things that make a relationship look good and the things that make it actually work, between the romantic gesture, which is real and has value, and the difficult conversation stayed into its end, which is where the foundation is actually built. Brandon Cole learned this at the cost of one very expensive ring and a great deal of public humiliation. He also learned it at the gain of something that could not be bought with the ring, the honest knowledge of himself, the willingness to look at the patterns he had been maintaining, the specific interior work that the Sabbath mornings and the counseling and the conversations with Pastor Whitaker produced, and the discovery, which is the unexpected ending's real content, that the God who is close to the brokenhearted is not a passive presence. He is a working one. He uses the floor-level moments to reach what the successful moments cannot access. He uses the crushed spirit, the closed door, the ring box in the kitchen drawer, to produce something that the planned and polished performance of a life was keeping just out of reach. The brokenhearted are not in the worst position. They are in the most accessible one. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And what he builds there in the closeness is the actual thing. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified about more inspirational stories on redemption and hope.